Hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining in from. I know that we have attendees coming from all over the world for this webinar today. So let's get started. The topic of the webinar is the magic of PI planning and the program board, brought to you by Swifties from Digite and the Scale Agile, provider of the safe or the Scale Agile framework. Let's go ahead and get started with some of the initial introductions and housekeeping, and we'll let some more people join in. I can see that happening even now. So we'll begin with some introductions. I'll talk a little bit about Digite, and for those of you who may not know us, and then I'll hand over the session to Richard Knaster on the main topic today, the magic of PI planning and the program board. After his session, I will give you a very quick, short overview of Swifties, our safe tool, and then we'll get into a Q&A session. And I'm looking forward to some great questions being asked for Richard. We received a bunch of questions already as part of people signing up for the webinar, but I'm hoping that we also get a good set of questions at the end of the webinar as well. So we'll record the webinar, so the recording will be made available at the after the webinar is completed. You'll get a follow-up email with the link to the webinar recording as well as the slides. On the right side of your screens in the GoToWebinar panel, you should see a questions box, and you can go ahead and ask your questions anytime. We will try and take most of them up at the end of the webinar towards in the Q&A session. But if there's something urgent, maybe we will take some of them as part of the session itself. So with that, let me get started with the introductions. Richard Knaster is Safe Fellow and Principal Consultant at Scale Agile Inc. My name is Mahesh Singh, and I'm going to be your host today. I'm co-founder and Senior Vice President of Marketing at Digite. A little bit more about Richard. Richard is more than 30 years in the software industry, in software and systems development across a range of roles, starting as a developer and, of course, being an executive on various organizations. Has led large-scale agile transformations over more than a decade now, and works actively in advancing safe, lean, agile methods as a safe fellow. He's really passionate about helping organizations create value, deliver value to their customers, and improving quality and flow. And I like this part about being more engaging and fun. Richard, I have to say you're probably one of the most approachable folks that I've met at Scale Agile, and I really enjoyed talking to you whenever we have done so. Um, Richard is co-author of Safe Distilled and the Safe Reference Guide, and he's also the author of several white papers, as probably many of you already know. Um, Before I hand over the mic to Richard, just a couple of slides here to tell you about Digite, the company. We've been a pioneer in web-based collaborative products and solutions for distributed teams since 2002. We are headquartered in Cupertino, California, which is here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And of course, we have customers around the world. We have offices in multiple locations. Our products typically are used for lean, agile, project program management, portfolio management, although we have also other applications in agile business functions like marketing or HR or procurement, and a range of other applications that our customers use us for. And of course, 50s is our built for safe, lean and visual safe tool that we have. And I talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the session today. And just a quick look at some of our customers. Many of these perhaps you might recognize. We have some very well-known brands around the world using our products, and we address needs from very small teams to tens of thousands of users in an enterprise using our products. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Richard. Richard, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for doing this webinar with us, and we are looking forward to your presentation today.
Thank you, Mahesh, for that wonderful introduction. And I just want to make sure that my slides are showing.
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. I'm really excited about it today. One of my most favorite events in SAFE is PI planning, and we're going to discuss why that is. The other motivation for this webinar is that I see a lot of organizations who implement SAFe and have been doing PI planning for a while, but they're not quite getting the benefits of PI planning. And so we're going to go over the reasons behind why we do PI planning. We're not going to focus as much on the how, but we're going to discuss how to achieve the benefits of PI planning. So the first thing we're going to do is just to think on what is PI planning, just in case you haven't had much exposure to SAFe. So PI planning happens every 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the cadence of the program increment that you have chosen. If you've chosen 8 weeks, then you'll do PI planning every 8 weeks. And this event provides a rhythm or heartbeat for the Agile release train. And where all possible, everyone attends in person so that we're face-to-face. If people can't attend face-to-face, then they will attend virtually. And recently, our company, we did a all distributed PI planning. We have been doing distributed PI planning for quite some time now, but we had prior to the COVID crisis, we had never had everyone on our train be virtual, and that was a great experience. So perhaps we can talk about that towards the end of the presentation. Product management are the ones who provide the feature priorities, and teams own their own story planning and estimation. And then, of course, we have architects and engineering and others who work as intermediaries for governance, interfaces, and dependencies. And the real goal of PI planning is to come out of it with a set of aligned PI objectives for the art in the next program increment. Alignment is not a natural state. People are not naturally aligned. So therefore, this event helps us get aligned, and it also helps synchronize the planning. You might have anywhere from 5 to 12 teams on an Agile release train. So you really want to not only be on the same cadence, but you also want to synchronize. We want to have a plan which will be an integrated plan to make sure that we can achieve those objectives. So one of the things that we have in SAFe is there's no magic in SAFe except for PI planning. And here's some quotes that can try to help you understand this. And if you've never done PI planning, you won't really understand the magic until you've actually done it. So here's a quote from one of our customers. PI planning allows for communication of business objectives, eliminates siloed decision-making, and gives every employee ownership. That's really powerful. One of the things that happens when you're doing a SAFe transformation is that the first time you do PI planning, it's a big deal. Every time you do PI planning, it's a big deal. And the fact that teams are taking ownership of their plans and are saying what they can and can't do and having a lot of discussions with business owners is one of the magic of PI planning. Here's another quote. It helps generate a community of people who want to work with each other and create fast, good products for the business. So doing software development is a social endeavor, and PI planning helps build that social network that SAFe relies upon. And we're going to talk about the primary benefits of PI planning. And instead of doing here's how you do PI planning, we're going to talk about, for each of the benefits, how do you achieve these benefits as a result of doing PI planning? So we're going to tackle each one of these items one at a time and describe how you can achieve these benefits. SAFe PI planning also helps improve business outcomes. And one of my favorite things is the people who do the work plan the work. People are not given a plan and say, here, you have to achieve this plan and you have to conform to this plan. It's all about adapting to change and really figuring out, as a team of Agile teams, what can we accomplish together? Because the teams are taking that ownership, that increases employee motivation and engagement. It also helps improve predictability, and faster time to market. And that results in better trust from management and their support for the Agile transformation. The other thing that you can expect is to get higher quality, because we're not only planning, but we're also doing some just enough design and requirements during the PI planning process, as well as the architecture. So let's go into it. So PI planning typically starts with an executive or business owner who describes the current state of the business. They share what the vision is for the portfolio of solutions, and they provide how the existing solutions are addressing customer needs. And what were the results from the last PI planning that we did? So we're really hearing what's going on in the business. In my company, Scaled Agile, we also discuss our revenue, how we're meeting our revenue targets, customer problems that have occurred and what we're going to do about them. So it's really the business context, so we know what we should be doing during PI planning and during the next program increment, which is a time box, as I mentioned earlier, about 8 to 12 weeks. Next, the product manager or product managers present the product vision and the next upcoming features. It might be 10 features, which is just a rule of thumb, as well as any upcoming milestones. Do we have a user conference? Is there a beta release? Are we doing a production release or production releases? So they'll describe all of that and make sure everyone has a good understanding of the features that the Agile release train are going to plan over the next program increment. Additionally, an enterprise architect or CTO will present the architectural vision. Have there been any changes to the architectural vision? Are there any architectural problems that we need to discuss? And often, a senior development manager may introduce new or revised lean and agile practices for the upcoming PI. Perhaps they will introduce test-driven development, or perhaps we will be addressing certain part of our continuous delivery pipeline, or begin implementing a continuous delivery pipeline. So those practices will be discussed, and we want the teams to set aside capacity for that work as well. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most important things is that developing software and solutions, and really any product, is a social endeavor. And not only does it include developers, it includes business people, it includes sales people, it includes marketing people, it includes operations people, it includes people from support. So it's really important that people get to know each other. And this way, during planning, they can speak to each other and get decisions made really fast, and to clarify things about the features in which they will be delivering. Next, identifying dependencies and fostering collaboration. What you are seeing here is this woman is working on the iteration plan, and her team members are speaking to other teams as she's looking over the plan for the PI. So you're seeing 4 iterations, and you're also seeing PI objectives that's there and risks that are there. And she has put a pink sticky on top of one of the user stories to indicate that there is a dependency there. Next, she goes and speaks with the team that they have a dependency with, and they agree on that dependency, whether or not that team can support them in that regard. Not only that, but they're going to discuss how are we going to collaborate together on that particular feature that has a dependency with the other team. And the dependency will be put up on the program board, and you're seeing an example of a program board, and the dependencies will be we'll put up there, and we'll describe in detail how that program board works. The other important thing is we want to match demand to capacity. So again, in this particular PI, there are 4 regular iterations and 1 innovation and planning iteration. And what you see here, you see the capacity and load. The teams will figure out what their capacity is for the program increment. And then as they add stories, they're going to make sure that their load is less than or equal to their capacity. This way, we're matching demand to capacity and ensuring we don't have too much work in progress that's going on in each and every iteration. They will also document their objectives. They'll summarize the plan and put them as objectives, and they'll also identify what we call stretch objectives, which are things that we plan to do. However, and actually they're now called uncommitted objectives, and these are things that we want to do, but there are a lot of risks and unknowns, and therefore we're making them uncommitted objectives. And this just gives warning to management that we might not get these particular objectives done, but we're going to do everything in our power to do so. So here's just two team members who are discussing their capacity, and in fact, in iteration 3, their load is 29 and their velocity is 28. So they're over capacity. So they're discussing how can we reduce our capacity, our load, so that we're not over our capacity. And so that's where I'm showing. And then on the right, you might move some stories over to PI2 and PI3. And you'll notice that there's color coding for the stickies. And one of the things that I'm seeing that I think is probably not the best thing to do is that they're deferring their maintenance work, which is the orange stickies, to PI2 and PI3, and you'll see very little orange stickies. So immediately we can spot problems pretty quickly with the color coding of the different stickies. We can make fast decisions. So you'll notice that this team, the gentleman on the right is one of the business owners, and he's discussing some trade-offs with the teams. So this way we can focus on the highest priority parts of the feature to make sure that we get the best business value. Often without PI planning, it may take weeks, it may take months to get decisions. But during this 2-day PI planning, we're making decisions with business owners in real time and really understanding what's most important to them. Another very important aspect of PI planning is we're just not doing planning, but we're also, since we're a team of teams, we need to know how we're going to work together. We want to determine what our design is going to be, our architecture that we'll use, the user experience. And so you're seeing this team where they are sketching out what they're going to be doing during the PI, and then using that sketch to determine which each of the teams that are involved in that feature, what each of them will be doing and what the architecture is, and have a general discussion of what the UI will be like and architectural aspects are as well. So if you come into PI planning and you're not doing this, you're missing out on a very important opportunity to sync on things like requirements and design and architecture. So here are some anti-patterns that I often see during planning. The business owners are supposed to provide the business context that we discussed earlier. Often, we don't have business owners who show up and don't provide the business context and what's happening in the business. Are sales increasing? Are sales decreasing? What is the impact that we're having from the COVID virus? How are we planning to address that? What ideas do we need from the Agile release train? Another large anti-pattern is that there's no aligned program backlog. In effect, each team is coming in with a list of independent features which have not been prioritized across the program. And this way, we're not really having an aligned plan. We just have a collection of people who are working together. Business owners who don't attend PI planning, that is a big problem, because then we can't make those trade-off discussions that I mentioned earlier and really get their feedback about what is really going to move the needle in the business with the features that we're going to be implementing. If there are no uncommitted objectives, that's also a sign where we're not really doing a good job with our risk management, or perhaps we're not taking enough risk as well. In order to bring great products to market, there's going to be some variability. There's going to be some risk, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. During PI planning, we're going to have a confidence vote, a 5 confidence vote. And if that confidence vote is less than 3, and the art continues on, they do what I call disagree and commit. So they don't have a high confidence in the plan, yet they are going to go with the plan anyway. That's not aligned with PI planning. We want to have a plan that the art believes in and that they have high confidence in that plan. And that's because the teams have been doing the planning, they do the estimates. However, sometimes teams are over optimistic, or they try to take on more work than they can. In fact, most of the times when there is low confidence, it's because the teams have taken on that too much work and they're over capacity. If during PI planning you're not having interactions with other teams, with product management, with system architects, business owners, and executives, you're not getting the full benefit of PI planning. The whole purpose of being face-to-face, or if we're virtual, that we're planning in real time together, is to have these conversations. These conversations are crucial for coming up with a good plan, and as well as making sure that we're aligned on the priorities that are really going to move the needle in terms of what we're delivering to the marketplace. Often I find when there's little or no interaction with the teams, is because the teams have done too much pre-work prior to PI planning, where they've decomposed all the features into stories already, and now they're just sequencing those stories into the plan. That's not how PI planning should work. We should be having discussions with user experience, with architects, with product management to discuss the features and really make sure that we understand them and what is going to make a difference to our customers. The next thing we're going to discuss is an important aspect that occurs during PI planning, which is the program board. And the purpose of the program board is to highlight feature delivery dates. What are the cross-team dependencies, and what are the key milestones? A key milestone might be the releases that we're doing through the PI. And during the PI, you may release every month, every week, multiple times a day. You need to plan those things. But these are the key milestones. It provides a visual representation of the plan. When are our features landing? And what are the dependencies with other teams? And when I say dependencies, I really think of them as being collaboration. Because we don't want to wait for one team to finish something before we start doing the work. It's really, what teams do we need to collaborate in order to bring this feature or features to market? And when we see a lot of dependencies, that tells us that we might have some delivery risk. It could also indicate other things, which I'll discuss shortly. It also will help identify areas of improvement for the architecture or the organization of the art. Often, when there are lots of dependencies, that's an indication that the way our architecture is structured, it's really difficult for the teams to work independently. So we might need to consider refactoring our code so that we're using APIs and microservices to allow the teams to work more independently. Or perhaps we're organized in component teams instead of feature teams, so that in order to deliver a feature, we're going to end up having a dependency with all the other component teams. So how do you use the program board? Well, the program board will help visualize where those features are planned to be delivered during the program increment. So you're seeing iteration 1, iteration 2, iteration 3, 4, 5. So this feature is being delivered by the cheetahs. There's another feature which is being delivered by the cougars, and they have a dependency on the Jaguars, and those red strings, sometimes we use strings, sometimes we use yarn, to connect the feature to the dependent item. Here, we're seeing an unusual situation where we have a feature which has a dependency to the lions, who also has dependency with the tigers, and it also needs UX help. That strangely looks very waterfallish. So that will be something that we want to take a look at and see how we can correct that situation. So let's look exactly how the program board works. So in the first column, what you're seeing is a top row which has the milestones. So in each iteration, if there are any particular milestones that the art needs to be aware of, we'll put them on that top row. Then underneath that are a list of all the teams in that particular art. We also might have a row for something that we might need from a shared services type group, such as user experience. And if we often have cross-art dependencies, we might want to list the art that we might have those cross-art dependencies with. Next, we'll put the iterations at the top of the program board. Then we will also, if we are dependent upon an external supplier or art, again, we will create a row or rows for those other arts and suppliers. However, too many dependencies with other arts and suppliers might be an anti-pattern. So it's good to look at that. Here's an example where we've got 2 key milestones on the program board. We have a beta release in iteration 3, and then we also have a user conference in iteration 5. And that helps us know what we will need to have ready for that beta and also for the user conference. We might have other things like contractually binding dates for delivery of value, often found in government entities, or we might want to put down when we need to integrate with external suppliers who might not have transformed to Agile yet. Next, we're seeing the feature delivery dates, and we place the feature on the program board where we believe it will be delivered. And that will be based on the iteration plans that the teams have created. And they'll see when the last story will have been completed for that particular feature. That's how they'll know when that feature will be completed. We don't want to see all the features landing at iteration 1.4, and we try not to plan anything for the last iteration, which is called the innovation and planning iteration. So next we'll highlight dependencies, and we'll connect the features with the dependent item, which might be a story, it might be a group of stories, it might be a file that we need from a vendor. It's whatever that feature is dependent upon, we want to write it down on the red sticky. So we will actually notate what that feature is dependent upon. And of course, on the blue cards, we'll put down what the name of that feature is. And here we're seeing that the feature and the dependency is happening in the same iteration. That could represent a source of risk. As I mentioned here, this feature being dependent on two other teams and a shared service may indicate that we might be waterfalling the program increment, and then we should fix that. Why is that happening? And you'll see many different things on the program board that might give you some pause. Here we have 2 features which are dependent on the lion. And one of the things that we want to do is safe. We don't want to purposely create dependencies. If at all possible, we want to eliminate and reduce dependencies to eliminate handoffs and delays. Every dependency is also a risk. And as I mentioned earlier, lots of dependencies often indicate there is an issue with the way that our solution is architected or how the train is organized. So for example, if you have an Agile team, quote, that does all the requirements for the train, which is certainly an anti-pattern, then all of the teams will have dependencies with, say, those business analysts, as an example. That's not what we want. We're not trying to create a critical path or Gantt chart. This is to understand when features are being delivered, what dependencies we have, and how we can reduce or eliminate dependencies between teams. So this is a very important point. I see many Agile release trains that treat dependencies in SAFe like traditional project management. So you need to get away from thinking of dependencies as a finish to start relationship, meaning that feature one can't start until develop API is completed. Dependencies in SAFe are collaboration points. When team A begins work on the API, team B should also begin work on the feature. In fact, team A and team B should work together on both the API and the feature itself. This way, the team developing the API understands how that feature or features is going to work so that they develop an API that will actually solve the problem. And if the people who are developing the feature need to change something about that particular feature and it affects the API, well, they'll know how to modify the API without breaking its architecture or doing something that will cause it to work improperly. So again, dependencies in SAFe should be thought as collaboration points, not a finish to start relationship. So here's some anti-patterns that I see with the program board. The very first one is the spider web, illustrated on the right, where there's too many features and insignificant dependencies. And that often happens when you come into PI planning that you don't really have features. You have a list of tasks or you have a list of stories, and the teams are calling them features, but in effect, they are really something else. And often you don't have an aligned program backlog. Another thing that you might see is what I call a dangler. The feature has a dependency string attached to it, but it's not connected to a dependency card. Or you might have what I call an orphan. You might have a red dependency, but it's not connected to a feature. It's okay for a feature, in fact, it's ideal for a feature not to have any dependencies with other teams. And we only want to put on the program board the most important dependencies. We don't want to create every single little dependency on there. For example, I see teams, again, waterfalling the iteration and also waterfalling the PI. They have different groups doing requirements, different groups doing design, and they have a lot of dependencies because they're basically recreating the waterfall process. We don't want that. SAFe is all lean and agile to its core. Another problem that you might see is what I call a backwards dependency, where the dependency occurs after the feature completion. It's okay that the dependency and the feature are happening within the same iteration, but it's not okay for the dependency to occur afterwards. That's an error. And then I see the critical path. And I think I showed you an example of that earlier, where you've got a feature, it has a dependency here, it has a dependency here, and a dependency there. That's often because the teams are creating the requirements here, they're doing a design here, and they're doing some API work, and then they're doing some development work here. That's not acceptable in SAFe. Again, SAFe is lean and agile to its core. So this helps you see that anti-pattern, that they're possibly treating the development in a waterfall-like manner. Again, the program board is not a Gantt chart, it's not a per chart. Ideally, every feature is delivered by a single team without any dependencies. And of course, sometimes that takes a while. You may need to refactor your architecture to allow such independent development. And the other thing I discussed before was fake features, where they're not really features that have been brought into PI planning. They are really tasks or stories. Like when a art tells me they have 50 features for the PI, more than likely those aren't features. Those are tasks, those are stories. They're anything but a feature. Another important thing to discuss is in today's world, distributed PI planning happens more and more. And especially with this COVID crisis, most companies now are doing fully distributed PI planning. And we have an advanced topic article on the SAFE website that you can read about how to do a fully distributed PI planning or partially distributed PI planning with SAFE, as well as some of the assets that are available to help you with that. We have a number of remote training aids. We have remote training enablement, and give you an idea of how would you do distributed PI planning based upon experiences from us doing it as well as our customers. Just to let you know, my new book is coming out soon. The Kindle version should be available in mid-June, and the paperback should be arriving around late July. And another thing I wanted to mention to you is that Digite is a sponsor of the SAFE Summit, the EMEA SAFE Summit, the European SAFE Summit, and that's occurring between June 10th and June 11th. And if you haven't signed up yet, it's not too late to register. At the bottom here, you'll see the link for registering for the SAFE Summit, and you'll be able to visit Digite in their virtual booth there, and we have some really cool virtual tools that we'll be using for the conference to make it feel like you're really there. Well, Mahesh, that's it for my presentation. So I want to turn this back over to you.
Richard, thanks very much for a great presentation and topics I think that are probably on the minds of everybody who's implementing SAFE. So before I get to a bunch of questions that have come up, I just wanted to give everybody a quick overview of our Swifties tool. And folks, just to answer a couple of questions, a couple of points, address a couple of points. Firstly, please go ahead and ask any question that you have for Richard using the questions panel on the right side of your screens. And secondly, a lot of you asked this question whether we're going to be sharing the webinar recording and slides. Yes, we will do a follow-up email after this and send you guys the link to the slides as well as the recording. So go ahead and put your questions in. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and just talk a little bit quickly about the Swifties tool. EASE is essentially enterprise agility with SAFE. So firstly, it provides a sort of full coverage to the full SAFE structure from portfolio to large solutions to the program board and to the team boards, and gives you a complete predefined hierarchy of these boards and makes it easy for you to configure it to the way that you want to set up your SAFE instance from essential SAFE all the way to full SAFE. And of course, we support both SAFE 4.5 and 5.0 workflows. It helps you essentially visualize your complete hierarchy from all the way from the epics defined at the portfolio level all the way down to user stories at the team level in each of your workspaces, and essentially gives you the ability to sort of see the overall progress of work based on the hierarchy that you define. One of the key aspects of specific to PI planning in the program board, one of the key things that we've seen our customers request is how do they do high-level capacity planning. So this is something unique that we provide, where you can actually on a continuous basis define the capacity that you have to do work and the demand that you have. What Richard talked about earlier in terms of being able to match your capacity to the demand that you have on your team. So you can set up multiple of these planning sessions as you go from one quarter to the next or one PI to the next, and you can define for each of these PIs what is the capacity that you have across different teams, and use that as a tool for mapping your features that you have, which are currently unallocated on the left hand side that you can see, to specific arts and specific PIs throughout the planning horizon that you have. So you can see on the right hand side the different PIs that are visualized between Jan, March, and May, and you can see some features that have been already assigned to those PIs and some that are not yet. And as you do this, it will basically tell you how much capacity you have still remaining for each PI, and you can do a quick high-level plan at the overall PI level. So this is something really cool that we have added based on customer feedback on how they like to do their planning, in order to be able to then get to the detailed PI planning during the PI planning session. Um, we provide a bunch of interesting things around making PI planning and sprint planning very collaborative. I'm sorry, that was a typo there. It's not spring, it's sprint. Um, so we provide the ability to simply drag and drop cards which are not yet assigned to a particular PI into a PI scope and help you define the overall scope of the PI. And then similarly at the sprint level, each team, as they are breaking down the features into user stories, they can do the same thing for each sprint and be able to understand what is the overall sprint plan that they have for the PI that they have, the 5 sprints that they have. Another thing that is really very cool is that you can completely implement some of the things that Richard just talked about using the program board or the dependency board. And we do a couple of things that kind of take away some of the guesswork in terms of how well you define the dependencies and the milestones, etc. So the program board is a multi-art, multi-team board that is automatically generated as teams start to do their work and start to plan the features and assign them to specific teams and specific PIs and sprints. And as they appear here, now teams can simply drag and drop and click these cards to define the dependencies between these and visualize them. And one of the things that we do is we highlight anything which is set up as a backward dependency by drawing it in red. And once those dependencies are resolved, they all become green. So ideally, you should be able to see green dependencies as long as everything is sort of defined in a valid fashion. Um, we provide a range of analytics and metrics to help you understand what your overall status is at the art level and at individual team level, as well as down to a particular sprint level. Similarly, for those of you who are focused on continuous improvement and lean and flow, we provide a range of lean analytics which are very rich in terms of the way that you can analyze your flow and your lead time performance and see how you can improve your overall throughput and value that you deliver to the customer. So we have a range of metrics that we provide, which kind of distinguishes us from our competition in that sense. And finally, of course, we also integrate with nearly 50 plus tools that you might have, whether it is TFS or Jira or Rally or version 1 or other software engineering tools, and give you sort of a end-to-end view to your overall safe lifecycle and to the safe instance by providing that portfolio management capability and the backlog management capability that you might need as you're trying to prioritize the right things to be done in the right PI at the right sprint level. So just a very quick introduction. Those of you who are interested, we can certainly connect with you offline to provide you a little more detail in terms of the product capabilities. So with that, we're going to get back to the Q&A session. And Richard, let me go ahead and get started with some of the questions that came in earlier in the webinar, and then we'll go to some of the questions that have come up over the session. So I think one of the first things that most people have, or rather not most people, but many people have this impression that the SAFe framework is very heavy and it can be very prescriptive. One of the questions that was sent was that the PI planning itself can appear very heavy. Is there a slim version of the PI planning? Uh, have you seen this kind of a request or a question?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is to really understand, as we did today, to try to help explain what the purpose of PI planning is. And over time, you'll find that you'll do PI planning faster and faster. But it's 2 days for a reason. If you look at the agenda for PI planning, there's enough stuff that's going on that it's just more than just planning. When you are sketching out your architecture or how you're going to design a module for the feature that you're developing, or creating the architectural runway for future features, that requires some discussion. And so that's why it's 2 days. It's because it's really a meeting to collaborate on how we're going to successfully deliver the work during the next program increment. And SAFe is descriptive, not prescriptive. So, if you can do PI planning in a day instead of 2 days, that's fine. But I also suggest that if you're going to do a shorter PI planning time box, that you do it in 2 half days. This way, you can think overnight about your plans, and often things don't come out until the next day. So if you want to reduce the time it takes to do PI planning, then I suggest that you can look at doing it on 2 half days. Also, what is the bottlenecks that is occurring during PI planning? If people are sitting around and are not doing anything, chances are you've done too much upfront preparation. And there's a number of dangers with that. If you come into PI planning with all your features decomposed into stories, then you're not discussing things with UX people and with architects and with business owners to really figure out what's being needed. That's why we're meeting in person, because we really want to understand everything we need in order to develop great products.
Perfect. Thank you for that very detailed answer, and I think it really provides a mechanism for people to think about how to organize the PI planning so it doesn't appear big and complex. Can be really done more effectively. Uh, One of the things that you talked about during the PI planning anti-patterns was about business value. And one of the questions that came up while you were talking about it actually was that a business value isn't working for a lot of arts. They don't use it, likely because business owners aren't present, or know how to apply it. And instead, we are seeing arts use feature completion metrics instead of business value. What are your thoughts about this deviation? And I know you talked about this a little bit, but I think perhaps this is something that you want to address again, just to help teams get to business value rather than just other operational metrics.
Right. So one of the most important things when we go to a lean and agile approach like SAFe is that we don't want to measure output. We want to measure value. And that's why in SAFe, we assign business value to the PI objectives. That closes the loop in understanding between the teams and the business owners. So they might put an objective lower, maybe it's a 3 or 4. It's on a scale of 1 to 10. Yes, it's somewhat subjective, but it's giving the art a sense of, what are the most important things for each team. So each objective will be scored on a ranking of 1 to 10. 10s are, we must have this during the PI. And then from there, you would go down from, okay, well, we can't make everything a 10. What's the next most important thing? And again, that helps, close the loop in understanding. If we have different understandings of the priorities of things, well, that tells us we need to have some more conversation. Why are we out of alignment? Similar to planning poker, the most important part of planning poker is not getting the best estimate, but is identifying the differences in understanding of what the scope of the feature is. It's a good analogy for the business value. Now, Mahesh, did you mention that the business owners are not showing up to PI planning?
Yes, that is what their question said. It is probably because business owners aren't showing up at the PI planning sessions. That's why the focus moves away from business value to feature metrics, feature completion metrics.
Right, and it's very difficult to measure value because it's a lagging indicator, and that's why we assign business value to the PI objectives. And at the end of the program increment, they will see a final system demo. So we're doing system demos each and every iteration, and then we'll have one last final system demo to demonstrate what is being done. And the teams and the business owners will discuss what actually got accomplished and what didn't get accomplished, and they will assign it a business value. And that will let us know how predictably the train is delivering value. So to me, this is a very integral part of PI planning, and it's extremely important that business owners are showing up, because if they're not showing up, then what's their real commitment to the transformation? How are we going to really have the important business discussions with the business owners and finding out what is what are the things that are really going to make a difference? It's not about delivering lots of features. It's about delivering value to our customers that are going to provide the most benefit to them, and what things are going to differentiate us from our competition. It's part of implementing our strategy. And business owners also need to describe and remind us of what the strategy is each and every PI, and if there are any changes to the strategy, by communicating to the train all at the same time, we can start gaining strategic agility.
Absolutely. And I think just to add a little bit based on our own experience with our customers as well as our own work at Digite, there is absolutely no shortcut to having the business owners, whether they are marketing and sales folks or leadership representatives, because unless they are in the room, there is no way that teams can on their own figure out the business value. And so there is no, I would say that if the business owners aren't showing up, there is a problem that needs to be solved perhaps at a higher level or at an upstream level to ensure that they show up for the PI planning as well. Um, uh, so, Richard, there are several questions that have come up, and I'm going to try and sort of combine them into saying what are some of your tips for distributed PI planning. There is questions around, what are some of the best practices. Also, do distributed PI planning sessions take longer than 2 days? So, what have you seen? I know that you mentioned that Scaled Agile itself has done its completely virtual PI planning recently. So could you share some tips on how to organize for a distributed PI planning session? Besides, of course, using tools like what I showed here, or other tools that I know many companies use in terms of tracking their overall PI.
Yeah, and that is actually an important thing, is that you need, if you're not face to face, you need tools to be able to communicate things. You need to be able to have the team's plan that's visible to everyone, and everyone can be working on the plan together in real time when you're not together. And you asked a really good question about the distributed planning. Do you need more than 2 days? Yes, you probably will need 3 days for PI planning in that case. And we have a really good article on the SAFE website under Advanced Topics, and it's called Distributed PI Planning with SAFE. If you just do a search on distributed PI planning, that article will come right up. So there's definitely, more preparation that you need for that. So first of all, what are the communication tools that you're going to be using for PI planning? Are you going to be using Zoom? Are you going to use Google Meet, etc.? Which tools are compatible with the organization's desktops or laptops that they'll be using? Where are we going to put our features and our stories? How are we going to do the program board? So having a tool like Digite really helps by being able to do that work remotely instead of in person. And it's really important that you give the teams some extra time for the planning. It takes more time to plan when everyone is remote. Now, the good news is that when everyone is remote, everyone is at the same disadvantage, and that actually makes it pretty smooth.
Uh-huh.
And what we found is when we use tools to represent the team's planning area, the iteration plans and PI objectives and program risks, and not only could that team see their work, but other teams could see their work as well. That was extremely helpful. Having instant messaging tools and group chat and good video conferencing is really important. The collaboration tools that we just discussed about are another aspect of it. Having facilitators, you might need multiple facilitators who can visit more than one team if there are questions. People get often lost during PI planning, so it's always good to put up the agenda throughout the day and let people know where they are. Have a shorter day. Don't do 8 hours. Don't even do 7 hours. Maybe you want to do 5 or 6 hours for the PI planning, or maybe you'll find that you want to even do less hours. So you'll see an example distributed PI planning calendar on the SAFE website in that advanced topic article that I mentioned. And typically, you'll spend more time on the team breakouts on the second day. In the third day, you will also have team breakouts. So that article will give you a pretty good idea of how you would do that distributed planning, what you might be doing differently on day 1 and day 2 and day 3. And what synchronization points are you going to need? How are teams going to communicate with each other? So if everyone is on the same conference call, well, how are we going to discuss things that need to be worked out between two teams? You need to also have the ability to have breakout conference calls. How are we going to arrange that? How are we going to present the draft plan reviews? So those are all things that need to be worked out in advance, and the tooling helps quite a bit. The video conferencing helps a lot as well.
Awesome. One other thing that I've seen teams do is that they actually take a break after. So they split the days into 4 sessions, and typically it's 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon session. And of course, for distributed teams, it might go another few hours in the late evening. But they do 2-hour sessions, and then they take a half an hour break. And so every half an hour is a sort of a summarization of what they did in the last 2 hours, and talk through across teams and to the art leaders, etc. At the end of those 2 hours for anything that's still a unsettled point, still an open item for discussion. So every 2 hours they might take notes in a central place, or they might just bring feedback back to their own teams. But I think the more agile people are doing the PI planning session as well, short cycles, quick feedback sessions, and then making sure that there are no open points left. I think those are all things that they help the closure of all of the objectives of the PI planning session. A couple of other questions that came, which are, I think, in a related area, but one of them is, if the PI planning program board is at the team level, so you showed about the different teams on the left-hand side, are the teams themselves going to the PI planning session, or is it only the art leaders? And I think I know the answer, but Richard, could you answer that?
Sure. All the teams in the art plan at the same time, and they plan together. Even if some teams are remote and you have some teams that are face-to-face, everyone is doing that in real time. So we want to make sure that we have overlapping hours between the different teams. The whole purpose of PI planning is to gain alignment across the teams. So that means we all want to hear the business context at the same time. We want to all hear what features that we're going to be planning for this particular PI. So if it's not done at the same time, then you're not really doing PI planning. It's a real anti-pattern. And teams, when you go to the program board, typically what we do is that we have a representative from each team go up to the program board together and put the feature up there, as well as connecting the string to that dependency, so that we have agreement between one team and the other. Yes, this is how we are going to work together. And again, don't think of them as finish to start dependencies. Think of them, we have a collaboration that's needed between these two teams. How are we going to do that during the PI? So there's also a discussion of how we're going to collaborate. And is there any way in which we can eliminate dependency between the two teams? Often you can't do that, but often you can. So it's really done together. So when you saw that, team planning, it was creating its plan for the iteration, but then we get the features are put onto the program board to show when they're landing and what dependencies they have. So each team will put their own features up on the program board, and they will work with other teams to record their dependencies and discuss, again, how are they going to collaborate in order to achieve that delivery.
Perfect. Um, there are a bunch of questions that have come up on the tool side, and what I'd like to request for all the people who ask those questions is that if we could do a follow-up session with you and answer those tool questions, I think that might be the best way to utilize the time that we have here. Richard, we are already at the bottom of the hour here, and I think there is one question that has come up which I think will probably summarize things nicely for everyone on the webinar as well as for you, and which is that if there is one sort of best practice, one advice that you wanted to give today to teams that are implementing SAFe and are starting on the first PI, what will your advice be? I mean, maybe
That's
I'm
a good
putting you on the
question.
spot here, but yeah, I think
No.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that they really prepare for that first PI planning. You know, PI planning is a very transformative event. And it will be the first time, maybe for many teams, even those who are, quote, already agile, that they are really going to be creating plans which, you know, they own. So, you know, we obviously there's a plan for the entire art, and each team has plans for the implementation of their features, but they're now taking responsibility for their features, they're taking responsibilities for their risks. So as much as possible, you know, do enough preparation for the first PI planning, meaning that you have a good program backlog, it has been prioritized, make sure you have the proper people there, the RTEs, the business owners. Really describe to the business owners what their role is during PI planning and how important it is for them to be there to support not only this PI, their first PI planning, but subsequent PI plannings. Because otherwise, people will take that as the leaders say we should transform, but it's not for them, it's for us. And really, I think that's a critical thing. Another great pattern that has emerged over the past year or two is that when you start launching a train, also start launching lean portfolio management. Because often business owners and executives can't relate to team Agile or even doing Agile at a program level, such as an Agile release train. And so by starting to implement lean portfolio management, they understand how Agile applies to them, and then they understand how strategy will get aligned with execution, and really how important this event and other things within SAFe are really important to them.
Excellent. So with that, folks, I know that a bunch of you already had to drop off. We are past our session time, and we need to close it at this stage. There are a very exhaustive set of questions that came in, and unfortunately we couldn't take all of them. But what we will do is make sure to respond to each one of you on the question that you asked. And what I've done here is shared the contact information for both Richard and I, and please feel free to reach out to us with any other questions that you might have, or if you need information. Obviously, you have both the websites for further information. We will follow up with an email which will provide you the recording and the slides links, as well as take care of the question that we could not answer during the session. And I hope we are able to continue the discussion with all of you in terms of helping your own SAFe implementations. Richard, thank you again so much for this session today. I think I think you picked the 2 points which I think are probably the most on people's minds when they are planning their PI planning sessions, as well as, of course, planning the overall SAFe implementation. So I think you really tackled two of the most relevant topics on everybody's minds as they implement SAFe. Thank you so much for such a great session, and of course for all the responses to questions. Any last closing thoughts from your side?
You know, not really, other than thank you for having me, on this webinar. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to work with you, Mahesh. And also that I'm looking forward to seeing you at the EMEA Safe Summit and to visiting your virtual booth there. So everyone, stay safe. And I hope that we get through these difficult times with this COVID virus and that we can all be in person again.
That's fabulous way to complete the webinar, Richard. Thank you so much. You take care. And to all of the audience, thank you for joining us today. And as Richard said, stay safe. Also, do try and see if you can log into the to attend the European Safe Summit. I think one of the things that has possibly made many more people attend these virtual conferences with some of the greatest speakers that you can listen to on any of these topics, made it easier for you to attend them because they have become virtual. So the challenge of travel has gone down. The cost of the summit itself or the conference has come down. So it makes it easier for many more people to attend the European Summit. So please go ahead and take a look at it, and if you like, register for it. And
Mash, if I just make one more thing.
yeah,
One
please.
of my favorite things about virtual conferences is often when you go to an in-person conference, there are two presentations that you want to see, and they're happening at the same time.
Absolutely.
So when you're at a virtual conference, you can actually watch as many presentations as you want, and it's easier if there's a session that really isn't appealing to you. Well, you can leave that session much easier. You just close that session and go to another one. So that's one of the real benefits of the virtual conference, besides not having to travel.
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that one. So with that, folks, thank you so much once again. Have a great rest of the week. And Richard, you take care as well. And folks, we'll get back to you with a follow-up email with the links to the slides and the recording. Thanks a lot. Take care.